I made this video because almost 8 out of 10 people that call me for a vertical installation make this mistake. So I start with the potential for a 5-digit F-up page. Here, this little section of text in the install book says you got to nail to at least 1.5 inches, or if you got a ring shank nail, you got to nail to at least 1.25 inches with the nail behind the siding. That becomes very important. I'll show you why. Now, the first question that somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I want to install vertically." The first question I ask is, have you installed horizontal bracing in the stud wall? Okay. This picture here shows a stud wall, the vertical studs. Horizontal is a board you would put between those two so that you would have something to nail to. All right. And that has to be thought of at the walls going up stage. This is long before you've ever installed siding. So 9 out of 10 times that answer is no, okay? If you had horizontal braces, you would be able to do them up the wall and attach your siding as it goes up the wall right to the braces. So you could have braces, sheathing, siding, and you'd have enough meat for the nail, okay? The problem is they say, well, no, we didn't install horizontal bracing. Very next question I ask is, have you installed your trim yet? And the reason I ask that question is if you're a good installer, typically you'll install all your door, window, and corner trim before you install your siding. And if you have not put horizontal bracing in the stud wall and you've got all your trim installed, suddenly you realize that we have to put a furring strip on that wall or there's not enough meat to hold it. So I showed the two houses that have strips, or excuse me, have the trim installed because that's how you're supposed to do it. But if you've done that and you haven't done your furring strip, this is the temptation, okay? I always say, well, if you've already installed your trim, what do you plan to attach that siding to? And they say, well, the sheathing. This is what that looks like. That nail sticks out 1 inch into nothing. This is a major mistake, okay? That wood siding is going to continuously change sizes over seasonal moisture changes. So it's going to constantly put pressure on that nail. That's why we need 1.25 inch bite wood. This is a ring shank nail. If you just put it on this little ass piece of board like that, it's never going to hold it. That nail will work out. That siding will move. That it will cup. It will twist. Tongues can pop out of grooves. A lot of bad things can happen. This is absolutely not what you want to do. Here again, the line in the install guide is very small. I actually looked through both of the install guides when I was making this video. This mistake is not highlighted. It's very easy to make. That's why a lot of people make the mistake, okay? What you're supposed to do is this. This is the proper nailing pattern. So this is piece of siding through furring strip through sheathing, and that gives the nail plenty of meat to hold on to and pull out, okay? The problem is when you discover if you haven't put furring, this is the right way you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to put your furring strips on before you put your trim on so that your trim sticks out of the house at the right thickness, okay? If you haven't done that, you have a decision to make, okay? If you haven't put furring strips up, you've already installed your trim, and you don't have horizontal bracing in the stud wall, you either have to pull out all that trim, shim all that trim, or you have to find a way to get the siding to bite 1.5 inch nail and to get your trim to stick out the thickness. If you fur it out and put the siding on, it's going to stick past the trim. So I say to shim or not to shim. Dennis said the easiest way to fix this right now is just go get more cedar and go right up over the trim. The reality is, you're a contractor, you're sitting there in the field, you've got all this trim installed. The homeowner may or may not know or understand this. You discover this mistake. This is the temptation. And unfortunately, this is what a lot of people do when they make that mistake, right? They put their siding at risk of this nightmare, okay? And that's why I'm making the video, so that if you see this video before you do if you do this video before you see before you plan a vertical install, you'll know at the wall stage you need to put horizontal bracing in there. You'll know at the material felt wrap stage that you got to put the furring strips on before you put the trim up, okay? All right, so we've highlighted the wrong way to do it. We're going to take a look at some of the ways I see that people call so-called right. This is what we call the crosshatch method, where they've actually run furring strips vertically and they ran them horizontally over the top of that. So your whole wall is going to come out an inch and a half. Personally, I think that's overkill. This one I like because it's very creative. They're going diagonal with the furring strips. I think this would work. The reason they're doing these different things is so that you can actually get drainage behind the furring strip itself. Okay, so that's why everybody's getting creative with this. So at the Obdike Test Center, I was able to ask Dennis, how can we do this? How would we do it? And I shot this little clip of how we did it exactly right for Dennis. Okay, now we've prepped for a proper vertical install. And what we've done is we've put the drain wrap here. The hydro gap from Benjamin Obdike has these little bump outs, so water will drain behind the furring strip. So we've got drainage in place. We've got our trim put out over the furring strips with the right thickness. And now we're gonna start installing vertically with the wood. Okay, Dennis is a high-level installer. While we were sitting there talking, he just showed me this little trick on a vertical install. It saves a lot of money with Cedar. In that, shim strips or furring strips are way cheaper than Cedar. And so if you find yourself with a clear Cedar install and you don't want extra joints, you can stick a piece of furring in there. Dennis is gonna show us how in this next clip.
Placing the piece, you have the furring, treated furring laying around every place else. It is the same thickness as every place else on your board. You can take a piece here,
Shim strip.
get your vertical, your whole studding, nail it in place. And with the finish nails, you can actually pin it here. And your next piece goes on with the angle on it, you've now pinned it. You've saved yourself $7 worth of material for a 50-cent piece of strip.
And you save yourself waste on the whole Cedar order. I mean, you don't buy extra furring strips. They're cheap. You can run down the store and get them. The Cedar costs a lot more and it takes 6 weeks to get. At the end of the day, if you know what to plan for and you know what to expect, a vertical installation can come out beautifully. This was a customer who actually had that issue that I just highlighted because his installers didn't know it, and him and his installers parted ways, and they found guys that knew what they were doing. It cost about 30% more than the other guys, but that's because they factored in all the extra things they would have to do. They corrected the shim problem, they reinstalled his siding, and his house turned out beautiful. So it's not difficult. You just have to know. I mean, I've seen this so many times. You got to know at the wall stage to put the horizontal bracing in. If you don't, then you have to know when you're putting your sheathing up to put your furring strips up before your trim. And if you don't know those things, you find yourself in that position. So, Chris Buffalo, I'm going to sign off on this one. This particular trick was definitely, hopefully you avoided a 5-digit F up.